All right, welcome everyone to episode 33 of Ty's Training Talking with My Dad. I'm Ty, and here, kind of, with my father and wonderful co-host, Mr. C. We are actually recording this separately. Mr. C and I have been struggling with Himalayan Wi-Fi connections and time zones, etc. So I'm going to record the intro here. He's going to record the questions, and then I will record the answers, and our wonderful editors will hopefully splice that together like magic for you. And hopefully it won't be too unnatural. I think we had to do this at least once in the spring as well, but it comes with the territory when you are in rural Nepal. So we are here now in the Himalaya. We're getting relatively close to our summit window, which is super exciting. And a lot to talk about this week. Let's go ahead and dive into those questions.
Great to be here. We've had a great week here in Hilton Head. So we're having a lot of fun walking on the beach, seeing lots of dolphins and birds and great stuff. So it's all great. Okay, let's get into it. Before we walk through the week, I know you've had a bit of an unpredictable set of days in terms of where you've been, where your stuff is, and maintaining routine. Can you give us the broad strokes view of what's happened in this past week since you got settled into Kare, and where the hell are you now anyway?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind week here. I guess I should start out by saying we had some pretty serious political unrest here in Nepal, particularly in Kathmandu, which is the capital city. There's basically a coup, for lack of a better word, a revolution put together by a bunch of young people, where the political leadership, who had kind of been in charge for a long time, was ousted. They fled the country. There was a lot of rioting. There were some big buildings that got burned down and stuff like that. So pretty serious situation down there. So kind of everything that I'm going to talk about in my own problems definitely pale in comparison to anything there. There were people who were killed, unfortunately, and a lot of people injured, and obviously a lot of property destroyed and things like that. And just, the country itself is definitely hurting. So want to put that up front as kind of just, my heart is very much with the Nepali people as they work to rebuild and hopefully come back stronger from this. But definitely that was a big part of all this, was us in the mountains kind of paying attention to what was going on down in the lowlands in the cities. And luckily, where I was up in Kare, it was very quiet, but at the same time, the echoes of that was certainly felt all around the country, and it was international news, so all around the world as well. So again, my heart goes out to Nepal and all of its citizens, and I hope that this is a productive step forward for them in terms of their political process and government, and creates a more equitable future. All that said, now talking about me, and I'll kind of loop in how all of that stuff impacts myself and training and all those things that maybe you guys want to hear about. It's been, it's been a real whirlwind. I mean, the first thing, it's been really, really wet. So the weather has been tricky to work with in terms of both training as well as any kind of logistical stuff. So I know last time we talked about, I got here, or I got to Kare, and my altitude tent or machine generator was not working, which was kind of a big problem. And put a call out to social media, and luckily got a lot of really positive responses there in terms of people offering to help or lend their unit, things like that. So I was able to connect with a company based in Dubai called Altitude Training. They were really fantastic to work with, super quick. And this is where kind of my training self-centered stuff overlaps with the bigger picture Nepal stuff. Is they were sending this unit over, and it was on a plane, and literally, I think it was 20, 30 minutes from landing, I was tracking the flight into Kathmandu, and then they closed the airport in Kathmandu because of all the unrest and the riots and stuff like that. So that plane got sent back to Dubai. Actually, I think it got sent to India and then back to Dubai. And then we had to eventually go basically send someone to pick it up, bring it back here. And then we were dealing with the weather. So there's been a whole saga that I won't entirely bore you with. But I was a little bit anxious about just, one of my, I think, kind of secret weapons of training in the Himalaya has been, for the last couple of seasons, being able to use the hypoxic training up really, really high. It worked really well in the spring, and I really wanted to replicate that. And at this point, I'd left keto, I don't know, a week or two ago, and hadn't used or hadn't breathed like really hypoxic air since then. Obviously, going up to Mera Peak at 6,000-ish is great, but it's not it's not 8,000. It's definitely not 10,000 meters. So I was getting a little bit nervous about that, of, okay, how are we going to prepare for this? Are we going to kind of pivot and do a more traditional strategy where maybe we go to base camp a little bit earlier and do a handful of rotations up the mountain, which is always an option. But long story short, we did end up getting the unit. It got to Kathmandu, and then it sat in Kathmandu for a few days because of weather, and eventually made it to Lukla on one of the prop planes there. And I ended up going from Kare down to Lukla to meet it because, again, the weather has just been so bad that we were concerned it was basically just going to sit in Lukla. And I just wanted to get on the machine as quickly as possible. So I jogged down to Lukla on I think it was the 13th of September, and finally got on the machine. And then that's, yeah, now where we're recording this from is here in Lukla. So a little bit low. Hopefully we'll get back to Kare in a few days, ideally tomorrow. We'll see. But it's really going to depend on the weather and flights and all that. It will be a long and slow journey to haul the machine all the way back. The trail between Kare and Lukla is really, really rough right now. It's just unbelievably wet and slippery and muddy. And yeah, I would be concerned trying to carry the unit myself or putting it on a pack animal or a porter, that it could get damaged in that. So right now we're here in Lukla waiting for, let's see, yeah, a couple days now, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be back up into the really big mountains pretty soon. So yeah, that's kind of the last week, like broad strokes, and hopefully things smooth out a little bit.
Okay, now let's walk through the week training-wise. Monday's first workout on the glacier featured 30-second running intervals with 90-second recovery hikes. How do you adapt to interval training to work at 6,000 plus meters, which, by the way, is like 20,000 feet for us people who think in English terms, on unstable snow versus controlled treadmill conditions?
Okay, so diving into training, yeah, I think there's really not, to me, a huge difference between, say, the workouts I was doing on the Polichaski in Quito and the workouts that we're doing in Kare. The big difference is just obviously it's slower. So pace just kind of like everything gets readjusted. I'm wearing more clothing, I'm wearing boots, boots like the La Sportiva Cyclones, which is really like gator over a running shoe, but it's still heavier than, the lightweight trail running flats I might be using on the Polichaski. I'm carrying a bigger backpack. And then, of course, the snow and the snow conditions impact that. So I'd say there's less focus on pace and more on effort and heart rate, things like that, other metrics that I'm working on to make sure that, yeah, I'm hitting the right energy systems, as opposed to the right paces. I think that's really the big focus. So this was, 3090s is something I write in my log all the time. I do it almost every single day, whether it's on the bike or running. It's kind of like doing strides, basically just really short pickups with a easy, 90, like 3-to-1 recovery to work ratio. And this was kind of just an intro of, okay, let's just do something a little bit quicker on the glacier, see how it feels. And yeah, I think it went pretty well. Definitely, even this season versus last season, I think the snow is a lot slower. There's so much, in the spring, there's so many people on the mountain that it really packs down the snow. And, it's like running on a groomed ski trail or something. It's really nice, hard packed surface. Whereas here, we're getting snow almost every day. So there's some fresh accumulation, and also there's only a handful of people on the mountain ever. It's it's slower, but again, to me, I'm not really worrying about the pace. I'm really worrying about the effort and just trying to keep that stimulus that I've been giving myself for the last, whatever it's been, 12 or 16 weeks of making sure I'm touching that higher end energy system, every time I go out there, 2 or 3 times a week, and just staying fit. That's what it's all about.
Your heart rate responses have dropped significantly this week, barely getting above 120 during efforts that would have pushed much higher at lower altitudes. Is this normal acclimatization or high altitude effect, or does it concern you for the actual record attempt?
No, it definitely doesn't concern me. If anything, I think it's a good thing, and it's a pattern I've seen before, where especially if I take kind of a down period of lighter training, which I had on the way to Nepal, with the Chamonix trip in London and stuff like that. I probably had 7 or 9 days where, yeah, I had some good workouts, but the overall volume was definitely a lot lower. That I come back and maybe the first 3 or 4 days heart rate is pretty high, and then it kind of comes down quite a bit. I saw this in the spring. I've seen this in keto and other things where I've kind of started out in a new place. And so I'd say it's pretty standard. And if anything, yeah, I think it's probably a good thing, because to me, it shows like I'm doing the same pace and my heart rate is lower, right? Like that's always a good thing. I have landmarks on the route, like we've talked about a million times with Polichaski and others, where you can kind of benchmark yourself. So for Kare, it's like, okay, from the front door to crampon point, which is basically the edge of the glacier where you put your crampons on. And then from there up to high camp, and then high camp up to, there's like one steeper pitch where sometimes there's a rope. So like I know all those points. And so if I'm hitting those times and the times are right in line with where I want to be and the heart rate is lower, to me, that's a good thing. It shows you're really fit because your body is working less hard aerobically to go the same speed. That's a good thing. So yeah, definitely no concern at all. If anything, I think it's sometimes I almost feel like, oh gosh, like should I like throw in some pickups or something to get the heart rate a little higher. But again, it goes back to the last question about doing the interval workouts and stuff like that. And it's important to remember that's why we do those. It's not every single day we have to go hard. We go hard on the days that are meant to go hard and are structured, and then the other days are really about recovery while getting in some really gentle aerobic stimulus. And especially as we approach the end of the season, it's definitely better to err on the side of caution with those. So that's where we are with that.
You mentioned getting recognized a few times in Kare and Kathmandu, and even back in Chamonix last week. Do you enjoy these encounters with the public and fans, or does it ever feel like it's just disrupting to your training?
Okay, so there's a really funny quote from Mike Gordon, who's the bass player for Fish, in this documentary that they made about them called Bittersweet Motel back in, I think it was like the late 90s. And they're like, Mike, do you feel famous? Fish at the time was like this huge successful touring band. And he's like, yeah, like when I'm playing on stage at Madison Square Garden in front of a sold out crowd, I feel famous. But when I'm like at Walmart, I don't feel famous because no one knows who I am. Like he's very niche famous, part of this really successful musical group, but they're not the Beatles. They're not even, um, Justin Bieber or like, a pop star. Like they have a very niche audience. So, I guess to answer that question, yeah, I almost never feel famous at all. And I'd say to the second part of that question, those encounters are almost entirely positive and really nice and kind and wonderful, I would say. I think in the same way that Mike Gordon said that, like, I feel there are very, very specific situations where if like I put myself in a place where I'm surrounded by people who are in this niche in which I've kind of built a name for myself, then yeah, sometimes I get recognized like almost every day, and like during UTMB week or here, or like whatever in Kare or at Everest Base Camp or something. But there are like such specific places that it feels almost kind of silly. And yeah, for me, it's almost always a joy. If anything, it's funny because I think I've had a couple times, even in the last week here, where people have said like on social media, they'll send me a message and say like, "Hey, I saw you." I saw you running in Chamonix, or I saw you, running down Mirror Peak yesterday. And it's like, oh, cool. You just say, hey, like you can just say hi. And I think if anything, it's like, I enjoy that. I think it's fun. It's fun to meet people. And I've met a ton of like really cool people over the years, just from random strangers who have introduced themselves. And yeah, some like good friends actually I've met that way. So it's definitely, for me, it's all positive at this point, I would say. It's definitely not become a thing where it's an impedance. Like I remember when I was living in Flagstaff and training with Jim Walmsley a lot, we would go to the Grand Canyon. That's like Jim's equivalent of me being at Everest Base Camp, but he was much more famous at that time, I would say, even than me or anything. And yeah, he would like, we would be like literally about to like start our watches and go down, and like, six people would come over and want to take selfies and stuff. And so I get it. Like, I think if you're that level of popular, especially on social media, then there's some kind of obligation to give the people what they want and be nice. And I think there's a fine line to balance there, while also respecting, especially if you're out training, this is your job. And like for Jim, I think he straddled that line really, really well. If we were standing around in the parking lot, you know, peepawing or faffing about, whatever the expression is, procrastinating before we got started, then I think, yeah, it's totally fine to come and say, hey, like, can I get a selfie, whatever, talk to you for a sec? Yeah, no problem. I think if, once we're running, then it's like, okay, we're at work effectively. And he was really good about saying, hey, yeah, like great to, like literally like as we're running by, someone would be like, hey, Jim, can I get a picture? We'd be like, hey, I'll be up at the top in 2 hours or something, and yeah, we can do that then. So it's important to, I think, like just give yourself that space. And again, for me, like I'm such a freaking small fish that it's like never ever been an issue, but it's definitely something to think about. Like I think if you see someone who you like know on social media or whatever, it's like, yeah, like there's no harm in asking. And I think also just respecting, like if they're like out to dinner with their family or like at work essentially, then yeah, making sure that that's respectful. But yeah, it's for me here, especially in Nepal, like everyone is so awesome and kind, and like it's a like-minded group of people that are out here. So yeah, it's been all fun.
Wednesday's training session was conducted in complete whiteout conditions where you could, and I'm quoting, barely see your own feet. How do you balance the training value of being up there on the mountain versus the real safety risks of navigating glaciated terrain in zero visibility?
Yeah, Wednesday was a weird one in particular because it was fresh snow on the ground and really, really dense fog with some light snow falling. So I couldn't see the horizon. I couldn't see anything. And this is one of the things about coming here in September, we're kind of technically still in the monsoon season. So If we were here 6 weeks from now in, late October or something, you're probably gonna have bluebird skies, sun every single day. I literally haven't had a single sunny day yet. Like you can see behind me, it's like a ping pong ball. If you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, it's yeah, Mayor Peak is I think personally probably the best views of all the big mountains in the entire region for kind of like a smaller, easier mountain. And I have had zero views. Like I haven't seen anything up there. It's just been every single day. It's been cloudy and foggy and snowy, and so it's been one of the things of just like, yeah, this season is a little different even in the spring too. April, May is a lot sunnier and clearer, and that's why a lot more people are climbing than they are right now. But yeah, this one workout was really bizarre. It was almost disorienting in terms of just not having any point of reference other than my feet and the proprioception and sense of gravity. Other than that, it was just I was going uphill. I think I could see my footprints. Luckily, it wasn't snowing very hard, so I wasn't worried about getting lost or anything. And yeah, in terms of the safety side, it never felt like it was an unsafe situation. It more just felt weird and surreal. I think if it had been snowing enough that your footprints are getting covered up or you're worried about the GPS not working, then suddenly you're in a situation where if you're in a true whiteout, you actually can get lost. You can get disoriented even if you're on a pretty common, easy route like that. And Mara, it's a safe mountain. It does still have crevasses and edges and stuff like that you don't want to wander off by accident. So it's one of these things where you just kind of have to make the judgment call. And this one was one where it was weird, it was disorienting, but it never really felt dangerous. It just felt okay. I don't know if this is uh, the most productive just because the snow is so like hard to walk through and all that. But at the end of the day, it was fine. I really wanted to get in something that day. And it's like, like I said, this season, if you're not going to go out when the weather is like that, then you're not going to go out a lot of days. And I felt like it was more important to just get out there and get some work in. I didn't feel like it was a safety issue. So yeah, that was the call for that day.
Thursday's session had you feeling very heavy legged and moving much slower than expected. How do you distinguish between normal fatigue, effects of altitude, and potential overreaching in your training, especially when you're up so high in the mountains?
I think there's an important differentiation there all the time. I think the altitude exacerbates it a little bit because it makes that kind of red line of overtraining easier to reach sometimes. And like you said, it can be there are more compounding factors potentially. That said, I also have a really good sense of how my body should feel each day. And so I think I went into that one kind of knowing like Wednesday was a pretty hard day. And I thought, okay, I'm probably going to feel pretty tired tomorrow. So as long as it's kind of, we talk about expectations versus reality a lot on the podcast. So as long as the expectations and reality are lining up, I think that's generally, I don't worry about it too much. I have a good sense of, okay, I worked really hard yesterday, so I'm going to feel like garbage tomorrow, and that's fine. And making sure that like I understand that and I'm ready for it. The ones that are concerning are when you're like, okay, I'm going to go out and do a workout and I expect to feel fresh and poppy and, excited, and all of a sudden you're just none of those things and you feel like garbage. That's I think where you want to maybe take a step back, look back at the last couple days or even week and say, is there something going on here? Am I sick? Do I have some kind of injury? Am I overtraining, overreaching a little bit? And really here, especially again, we're, middle of September at this point. We're looking at a summit window maybe as soon as, next 2 weeks. There's no reason to push that. So I think that was the big thing for me that day and in general is just seeing those days and not pushing, not trying to hit any specific number of time. When I was in keto, I had very specific plans for every single day. It's like, okay, I'm doing 3 hours time on feet every day for 3 weeks, whatever it was, making sure that I hit that every single day, even if it just meant totally sludging or slogging and trudging up and, kind of feeling like shit, whatever. I'm just going to do that. Here, I give myself a little bit more flexibility because most of the fitness is already there. It was already done in the last 2 or 3 months. This is really kind of the fine tuning stage. And it's one of these things where the potential downside from an error is much greater than the potential upside from pushing a little bit farther. So I try to be really conservative in this last 2 to 3 week period, almost every single day. And so if I'm on the fence about, oh, should I do this? Should I not do this? It's almost always going to be, no, I'm going to cut this one out.
You noted getting a bit of a cough, which was concerning. At this altitude and with the record attempt approaching, how paranoid do you get about any signs of illness?
Short answer is like extremely paranoid. I think in the spring, a big part of what went wrong was I got sick at a really bad time. And, it was on that very first list of 16 things. One of the first, I think, 3 or 4 things was don't get sick. because I've come to Nepal so many times now, and it's really, really hard not to get sick. It's a double negative. It's really easy to get sick here. And I did not want to be dealing with that. And it was basically like the worst case scenario, honestly. It was like, I think I got sick like right when I got back from Makalo, which was maybe 2 weeks before my summit window. And I just didn't get better. And, we talked, I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast, but I definitely talked about it with you, Mr. C, about my heart rate and my resting heart rate and heart rate variability, and how I would go out on these really easy hikes and my heart rate would spike up, which to me was always a sign of just some underlying illness. For what it's worth, in retrospect, I actually heard that there was a lot of COVID going around EBC in the Khumbu Valley. This is talking to someone who was there like uh, at the same time, but talking to them like, I don't know, a month ago or something. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually COVID infection, because it felt a lot like when I had COVID. And the heart rate stuff that I noticed that really lingered for like 3 or 4 weeks after that was very similar to what I experienced when I had COVID back in 2022, I think. So it was, yeah, it was really bad. And long story short, that was one of my biggest things going into the season was, okay, whatever you can, just don't get sick. And it's sometimes easier said than done. I think, there's two really big things that I see in terms of ways that you can try to control for that. One is not getting your body too run down. So being really gracious with sleep, not overtraining, like I just talked about before, not pushing when you have the option. If you're on the fence, always being on the side of caution. I think that's a really big part of it. So that's one, is just like taking care of your body and doing everything you can. And the other is like literally just avoiding people. Khumbu Valley is incredibly crowded in the spring. Luckily, like I said, this time of year, it's much quieter. So I haven't, been around a lot of people. Like I was literally probably the only person in the lodge in Kare, other than the people who worked there, almost every single day. But even things like, when I was coming to Nepal, like in the airports, like, yeah, wearing a mask. And for what it's worth, like I was wearing masks like when I was going to races in like 2010, because I was paranoid about getting sick in airports and stuff. And like there's a million stories of that. So put your mask politics aside. This is just about, I don't want to get sick. It's whatever is COVID or the flu or cold, it doesn't matter. You're in a room with 10,000 other people. Like there's a lot of germs in there. So yeah, just trying to basically give yourself physical space from other people, so you just have less risk of infection. But yeah, luckily I'm feeling a lot better now. I've been doing both those things in terms of trying to mostly isolate myself, as well as just letting my body have its do its thing, being patient with it and all that. And so far so good, knock on wood. Yeah, it's definitely, that's one of the, I'd say, biggest things that I worry about here every single season. It's so hard not to get sick. And yeah, if we can not get sick, that would be just fantastic.
Friday, you described feeling bonky and having very low energy, attributing it to being underfueled. How challenging is nutrition management at altitude when appetite and digestion are affected?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a tricky balance. I think nutrition in general is something that's always been hard for me. And up here, I think it's even harder because, yeah, the altitude definitely does mess with your appetite a little bit, it messes with your digestion a little bit. And there's just fewer options for food. I mean, I remember we talked about this, but maybe like 3 or 4 episodes ago when I was in keto and like really heavy training block, and, talking about this quote from my friend David Wilder, who was saying, in college cross country, he would just go to the dining hall every night and eat until it hurt. And, I was kind of following that game plan, and it was working well down in keto. There's some of that here, but it's just, you're eating dalbat and just like rice and lentils. It's a little bit more filling. It's a little bit less calorically dense. So I think when you're training a lot, it can be hard to get enough fuel regardless of where you are, whether you're, in Kare going up to 6,000 meters every day, or in keto, or in, Boston, whatever it is. If you're training really, really hard, there is just a really fine balance of, you don't want to under fuel and go out and, feel bonky and like you're running out of energy. But at the same time, yeah, you don't want to like eat so much that you make yourself sick, or eat to an unhealthy amount. So it is a really fine line, and it's tricky, and it's definitely trickier up here. And, going from keto, where I had my routine and I did all my own cooking, and, had a very good sense of what my body needed every day, to suddenly being in Nepal, where the food is super different. Someone else is preparing it. You're waiting kind of on their schedule, all that. It's just a very different kind of experience. So yeah, it's something that I'm definitely still working on, but I think we're doing pretty well. And yeah, I'm grateful to have wonderful Nepali food here that is cooked for me. I love Nepali food. I love dalbat. I could eat dalbat every day.
Saturday's trek from Kare to Lukla turned into an epic sufferfest. It really sounded absolutely terrible. 8+ hours in rain, countless falls on wet rocks and mud, running out of food, finishing in darkness without a headlamp. What went wrong with your planning?
Gosh. I mean, like, what didn't go wrong with my planning? I mean, at the end of the day, it was expectations versus reality again. And this was one where, I'd done this hike one time before. And for context, the time that I previously did this, it was when Chris and I had run all the way from Lukla to the top of Mara Peak, come down, slept in Kare for like 6 hours, and then that next morning we ran back to Lukla. So we were doing basically this piece that I was doing fresh on 6 hours of sleep and having done this humongously mega like 20-hour day the day before. So I went into it thinking, oh well, it's obviously going to be way easier than that, and it's going to be way faster than that. And I think I looked it up, and we had done it in like, it took us like 8.5 hours or something. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this like 6 hours. It's going to be no problem. It's going to be super chill. I didn't even bring, like I said, I didn't bring a headlamp. And I left it like, I don't know, noon or something, because Dawa and I were communicating about flights and blah blah blah. And eventually we were like, okay, you just got to get a move on. And so I left, and yeah, I think I had like one bag of gummy candies, and the woman who runs the lodge had given me a pancake, like a big fat fluffy pancake on the way out. And that was all the food that I have. And I also thought, okay, I'm going to pass some towns. If I really need more snacks or something, I'll buy them. But I really thought, it's net downhill. It's not going to be that hard. It's going to be fine. And I just completely got my ass kicked. It was so unbelievably miserable. Like, there was maybe 1 hour at the very start where it was, kind of almost sunny for a bit. It was kind of nice. I was making decent time. And then eventually I went down into this cloud bank, and then it was just ping pong ball and rain for the rest of the day. I remember I hit the last little town, and everything was closed again because it's super early season. So I was kind of rationing my gummies and pancake bites. There's this like really rough section of trail there where you're kind of like going up and down and up and down through this really, really wet forest. And it was just, I think it took me like an hour to go a mile. And it wasn't even like a lot of climbing. It was just unbelievably muddy, like up to your knees mud, like every step. It was like basically walking through ocean water at the beach. It was so brutal. And then you have, because again, where Kare is, we're in basically a parallel valley to where Everest is. So you have to go up and over this big high mountain pass. It's like almost 2,000 vertical meters. So then we hit that. It was really wet. I just was sliding all over the place and going really slow. And I was kind of doing the math at this point, being like, man, I better hurry up or I'm going to be finishing in the dark. And I knew I didn't have a headlamp. And yeah, the descent down from that pass into Lukla is not trivial either. So I got up there. It was like freezing. It was raining. I was slipping and sliding all over the place, and just, yeah, eventually started coming down. And I remember there was one particular point where, actually, there are two memorable points. One was like right at the very top where it's really rocky and the rocks were really slippery, kind of boulder hopping, almost like big stairs. And I slipped, and like my pole came out of my hand and flew like 20 feet. And I was just like screaming. I was like, ah, I don't want to be here. Like, I was just having a temper tantrum for like the last 2 or 3 hours coming down. And the other one was, it had gotten dark at that point, and I was literally navigating by my watch light, which it's actually kind of a cool feature. The Garmin's have like a little tiny built-in flashlight, super dim. It's like, you wouldn't want to use it, but in a case like this, where it's semi-emergency, it's pretty helpful actually. So I turned that on, and there's as you come into Lukla, there's a bunch of these really big rivers, and you kind of come down really steep and then cross the river and then go up really steep, and then you do that like 3 or 4 times. And I was coming down one of these things towards the riverbank in the dark, and I got off of the trail, and I was just like on this hillside that was straight mud and rocks, and I was sliding down. I'm like, I'm just gonna like get buried in a mud slide right now. This is terrible. Like, it was like this moment of going from kind of, this is annoying and frustrating, to like, okay, this is actually kind of scary, and I'm really not tremendously thrilled with this situation right now. And that was a pretty real situation. And luckily I kind of just skirted around the side and found the trail again, but it was not cool there for a minute. And yeah, eventually got in, and got to town, and everything was fine. Like, whatever, this is what we do, is suffering, right? It's like basically my job is to put up with discomfort. And I think at the end of the day, it was just the discomfort that I had in my mind going into this was like so far. It was like orders of magnitude off of what I actually ended up encountering and dealing with. And I was not thrilled about it. But yeah, got to Lukla, got a warm bed, got the altitude machine. So, here we are. It's all good at the end of the day. But at that moment, I was just like, oh my God, like I cannot believe that this is happening right now. And it was all my fault. Like that was the thing, I think to me, I get the most frustrated in those situations where like things seem to be like going really poorly and it's 100% me. Like it's all my fault. And I'm really good at beating myself up. So yeah, that was my day.
In your logs, you mentioned Reinhold Messner's quote that climbing 8,000-meter mountains is not fun. How do you maintain motivation when so much of this preparation involves type 2 fun at best? That is, when it's really satisfying and there is a flow state you can achieve, but it's really hard work and not just hedonistic enjoyment.
Yeah, it's a funny quote. I think it's in the movie about NIMS, and he's talking about how 8,000 meter climbing is kind of becoming in vogue, and people are doing it more, and they're saying, "Oh, it's so fun climbing 8,000 meter mountains," and he's like this old German guy. He's like, "Hey, climbing 8,000 meter mountains is not fun. It is not fun." And I think there's like I have fun for what it's worth. Like I enjoy a lot of it. I enjoy the suffering. Like I just said, it's when the suffering and my expectation of the suffering are like really far apart. That's where to me it becomes a really big problem. But yeah, this whole week has, you know, it hasn't felt tremendously fun. I said before, I'm going up on this mountain every day. It's a beautiful mountain, but I can't see anything. It's wet. Like I'm putting on the same damp clothes every day. So yeah, and like, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because I signed up for this. Like this is my dream job. I get paid to do this stuff and it's amazing and I love it. At the same time, there's definitely parts of it that are really fun and glamorous and exciting and beautiful and joyful. And then there are parts where it's pretty uncomfortable and you just go do it because that's what we do. So I think there's a lot of truth in that, whether you're climbing 8,000 meter mountains, kind of the quote unquote traditional way where you're going to base camp and sitting around and doing rotations and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of that too, that, part of it can be fun and part of it can be probably pretty miserable. Like I've had plenty of miserable days hauling loads up mountains and, trying to get stuff done in the rain and all that. And again, wearing the same wet clothes for 2 weeks straight. It's not necessarily that fun, but at the same time, it's like, it's kind of the closest thing we have to old school adventure. And I think that's a big part of why people do this stuff is because it does feel unpredictable. It feels uncomfortable in a world where we have really, at least, in the United States and in a lot of countries, we've established a way to be very, very comfortable. And this is a way for you to actively kind of push out of your, quote unquote comfort zone that people talk about, right? You're not necessarily doing things because they are hedonistically enjoyable in the same way that like sitting on the couch and eating a pint of Ben and Jerry's and watching a funny movie is enjoyable. Like that is fun. It's great. It's funny. Ice cream tastes good. All those things are great, but also, I think there's a balance of that. And some people, they want their balance a different way. And for me, I've always been someone who has enjoyed the idea of going out and working hard and suffering to accomplish something, even if that thing is, way down the road. That's like kind of my whole MO is that's like what training is all about. That's what endurance is all about, is doing the hard stuff, the uncomfortable stuff, the less glamorous stuff, so that you can go out on the one day that you want to test yourself and see if you have it. And you can look back on this big, huge body of work that you've put in and all this suffering and discomfort that you've put yourself through and be like, oh yeah, I'm really strong now because of all that. So to me, that's kind of the most important part of all of this is accepting that it's not going to be comfortable. And that's almost kind of the point. If it were all comfortable and fun, and easy, I think it would be less fulfilling in the end. And again, it's not for everybody, but I think for me, that's one of the things that makes it special.
On Sunday, you spent over 2 hours walking up and down the stairs in a Lukla hostel with a 13-kilogram backpack because it was pouring rain outside. That sounds completely outrageous, or perhaps insane even. Why didn't you just go outside and train in the rain, or else maybe just take a rest day?
That's a pretty fair question. I think it goes back to what I was just saying, right? So, well, first of all, why didn't I just go outside and train in the rain? Because I only have one set of clothes. I literally have like my dry clothes that I'm wearing inside, and I have my exercise clothes, which are always some amount of damp and never get completely dry because I came to Lukla planning to be here for like 24 hours, and now it's like day 3, and it is what it is. But I don't have enough clothes that I was willing to go out and get completely soaked in the rain. So yeah, I there's literally one staircase. It's 10 stairs up, 10 stairs down. I figured it was 10 stairs was about 3 meters is about a story. And yeah, I did 1,000 meters in Lukla Coastal with a heavy backpack on. And luckily there were no other guests in the lodge at the time. It was just me and the family, and they're like old friends, so they kind of know that I do weird shit. But it's you just got to get the work done. Put on a couple of podcasts. World Championships for track and field is on. So the good news is there's lots of great track and field podcasts that are dissecting like everyday World Championships. So I had some good podcasts on, and just walking up and down the stairs and walking up and down the stairs. And I set my watch to track how many like steps I was taking as a way to kind of keep track of it, because obviously I'm not going to count every single one. But it was a lot. It was kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, why not take a rest day? Because I don't like. I think that's kind of why I'm not terrible at what I do, is because I can get creative sometimes, even though some people might see it as like super ridiculous and outrageous. And it's just like, okay, well, you got to get your work in. You got to get your work in. Like I remember you, Mr. C, like doing work in the hotel bathroom when we were like little kids at freaking, on vacation somewhere at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and on your laptop or something. And it's like, I don't think it's that different than that. It's like you have work you have to do, and you have your lifestyle, and you have your surroundings and the kind of pragmatics of that, and you have to make all those things work together. And I think, maybe that's one of my weird, quirky athlete superpowers, is I've just always found a way to get stuff in. Like I've literally done runs in airports, like just around a gate maybe, or like if I have someone with me, then I can leave a bag, and then I'll some airports are huge. You can run miles and miles through airports. And I've also done runs on planes, like a big plane, transcon plane, where they have like a big galleyway and everyone's asleep or something. You just do little tiny laps. Like it's almost like running in place, but it's like you gotta get creative sometimes. It's you gotta work with what you're given. And this was just another situation like that. And honestly, it was nice. It was a good workout. Felt good. Got the heart rate up. And yeah, I only got my clothes a little bit sweaty instead of getting everything completely soaked. So, win-win.
Looking at this week, equipment failures, dangerous conditions, physical struggles, and that epic trek to Lukla, how do you assess whether these challenges are building resistance or potentially undermining your preparation for your summit attempt on Everest?
Well, I sure hope they're building resilience. I think, like I was just saying, sometimes you have to get creative. We have a plan, you have what you put on paper, or in my case, like on the spreadsheet, and then you have real life. And sometimes spreadsheet and real life look pretty similar, and sometimes they look completely different. And it's about staying positive and staying creative, and just making sure that you're checking the boxes that you need to feel ready to go. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing. Was as soon as all this craziness started happening with altitude tent and moving me and my stuff and blah, 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 and being in different places, not having the altitude tent, now having it, but being lower, it's just about, okay, instead of freaking out because I'm not doing exactly what I wrote down on my training calendar, it's okay, what was the point of each of those days? What am I actually trying to accomplish on a training level, on a physiological level, on a mental preparation level, whatever it is? What am I actually trying to accomplish to be ready for my goal? And how can I do that given the conditions that I have here now? Because I'm not, there's nothing we can do about where we are, and all that stuff. That's happened. So let's let go of that. Let's accept where we are here, and then say, okay, these are the things that I wanted to accomplish in this, say, 3 to 4 week period here in Nepal. How do I accomplish those given where I am now? And I think, even like looking at that super miserable day on Saturday, I honestly think, yeah, it was a pretty good opportunity to practice feeling really miserable. And, this is definitely a possibility that I'm going to have several hours on Everest that feel extremely bad. Maybe I go into it with at least better expectations, but I think the likelihood that I'm going to feel really terrible and want to go home and want to turn around and not want to keep going and feel sorry for myself and have a little toddler temper tantrum, all those things are probably going to happen. And so having that just really tough day where I didn't plan for it, I think that was a good thing mentally. I don't think it didn't feel like it put me in a hole or anything, and I felt better afterwards. And, even, yeah, like going up and down the stairs for 2 hours, things like that. It's just practicing that like mental focus and almost boredom, which we've talked about in other episodes from doing stuff on the Stairmaster and stuff. It's basically the same thing. And that I think is pretty good preparation for walking up a mountain in the dark, which is what we're going to be doing for, probably 10 or 12 hours. So these things have been frustrating, but I think it's also been a really good way for me to almost go back to first principles and say, okay, I put this plan together, but I put the plan together based on the goal outcome. The outcome is what matters. The training doesn't matter. And so let's go back to first principles and think, okay, I want to be ready to do X, Y, and Z on, October 1st. How do we recreate that in a different situation, which is where we are now? So I think it's been good. I think it's helped me, force me to be a little bit flexible. I think that it's great when everything goes perfectly, but it almost never does, especially here in the Himalaya. And, it's just another opportunity to remind myself to, kind of roll with the punches and just let life come at you.
Lastly, you've now had a few days training with the altitude machine and looking ahead. How are you feeling about the last week or two of training? And of course, everyone wants to know, do you have a date yet for the summit attempt?
So going back to what I was just saying, I think actually the training has gone really well. I feel really, really fit. I feel super strong. If I go back to what I was saying about, what do I want X, Y, and Z to arrive on October 1st? I knew I wanted to be comfortable with my gear, comfortable on snow. I wanted to feel really strong, being able to carry a heavier backpack and really aerobically fit, like being able to move quickly. Those were kind of my big things. And I feel like I've done almost all of those. I feel like the altitude is probably the one thing where I'm just kind of getting started with that. I've only had a few days with the machine, but so far it's been really good. I've had a couple days now where I've been able to sit for a while over with altitude over 10,000 meters, which is significantly higher than Everest. And O2 sats have been way better than I expected them to be. I think probably in the 70s. I thought maybe it would be pretty bad because I haven't had that opportunity to breathe that super hypoxic air in a while. And so that was definitely a plus. And so I think using that for the next, whatever it is, 10 to 15 days is going to be really good. I think I'm going to feel really, really strong, really fit, really altitude ready, all those things by the time I get there. And yeah, in terms of weather windows, we are definitely starting to look at it. It looks like it's going to depend both on weather and rope fixing. The rope fixers are actually doing a really, really good job, and they might be ready even earlier than we expected, which is great. So we might get a window as early as another week or 10 days from now, which would be super cool. So fingers crossed, but yeah, weather looks really good too. The jet stream, which was our big nemesis in the spring, which is that really, really fast, high powered wind that blows off the top of the mountain, is way up north in China. So the wind is really low on the top of the mountain right now. So it's really just a matter of getting the ropes fixed on the mountain and then dealing with the precipitation, making sure that there's not any big storms coming and stuff like that. But yeah, we don't have a set date yet, but we are getting close to that point. So stay tuned. We will definitely have that soon.
That's all the questions I've got. Anything you want to add? Else you can read us out.
All right, guys, hopefully this works and we're able to get this episode to you. Again, I apologize. It's not as natural as usual, but hopefully Mr. C and I will be back connected for next week. For now, thank you so much for listening, watching. Please send any feedback, your questions, comments, concerns, hopes, dreams. You can send those to my email, ty@chasky.run, or DM me, Tyler C. Andrews, on social media, wherever, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. Leave a comment. You know the drill. Remember, this is a multimedia project. You can also read my raw training blogs at tylercandrews.com or check that out on Substack at Tyler C. Andrews. Ty's Training is a Chasky Media production brought to you by the good folks at the Chasky Foundation, the world's only nonprofit foundation supporting coaching, travel, and community for endurance athletes. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next week. Ciao.